Hey guys, this is Sports with Dylan. There has been no sports news in the past just over a week. So I figured I'd have to make a video about something. As I was scrolling through some of my old videos to see if I could get any ideas, I came across a video I made. 3 potential NHL trades. I'll leave a link to that video in the description. It is hilarious how much I have developed as a YouTuber since then. But today, you get to witness another trades video in 10 potential NHL trades. Tyson Barrie is a solid defenseman, but he's being paid a lot more than his worth. And the Oilers are in a tight cap situation after this offseason, although it should clear up once Oscar Klefbom and Mike Smith go on long-term injury reserve. That will clear up plenty of cap space, but it would still make sense to ship out one of your more expensive contracts. Maybe bring in a younger, cheaper, better defenseman to replace Tyson Barrie. But Tyson Barrie's gotta go. Another Oilers player that's been in plenty of rumors is Jesse Puljujarvi. And he didn't quite crack this list, but I do believe he would also be traded soon. I think the best destination for Tyson Barrie would be the Carolina Hurricanes. That's because the Carolina Hurricanes and the Edmonton Oilers have done deals together before. For example, the Warren Foegele-Ethan Bear trade. In fact, some have even said that the Oilers could trade Tyson Barrie to the Hurricanes in exchange for Ethan Bear and a pick. That would be interesting, but I'm not so sure a reunion with Ethan Bear would be amazing. Now, I like Ethan Bear quite a bit, and I was extremely sad when he's traded, and I'd like to get rid of Warren Foegele. But I don't think it's wise for the Oilers to bring Ethan Bear back after the fact that he hasn't done much. If they're shipping out Barrie, bring in a different, young, cheap defenseman that can bring more quality of play than Ethan Bear. You'll find that there is a lot of defensemen on this list, and any of the teams that I currently think are the best team for that defenseman to go to, it's possible that any of the other defensemen on this list go to one of those teams. Or there's plenty of other teams those defensemen could go to, but I've marked out the best trade destination for each player. So, for Jake Muzzin, I think that's the Florida Panthers. The Florida Panthers love bringing in veteran players. And Jake Muzzin is a veteran player. They also lost a couple of defenders this offseason. So why not bring in a veteran defenseman to help carry up the fort? Especially with Mackenzie Weegar being traded, Ben Shiro going to Detroit, they really need a number 2 defenseman, and Jake Muzzin would easily fill that role. Toronto, on the other hand, has an abundance of defensemen. There's tons of defensemen, all of which that could be traded. Justin Hall's another big one in trade rumors, but I think Jake Muzzin's the best trade candidate, given that he's the oldest and the most expensive. Plus, he's clearly declining quite a bit. Now, for this trade, the Maple Leafs would clearly have to withhold some of Jake Muzzin's salary, because the Panthers are also in an extremely tight salary cap situation, especially after signing Matthew Tkachuk to that huge contract. So they don't have the money to take on a big contract, unlike the Carolina Hurricanes. But they could still use a defenseman. So if the Maple Leafs were willing to retain some of the salary cap, then the Panthers would gladly take on at least half of the contract. That's right. 2 former Kings defensemen could be on the move this offseason. The Golden Knights, like virtually every other competitive team, are in salary cap hell right now. So they're going to need to ship out some of their older, more expensive veterans, like every other competitive team, and most of the teams on this list. That's the main reason for getting rid of their players. And there's plenty of other players on the trade market because of that reason. especially, though, the Golden Knights. After bringing in Jack Eichel on his huge contract, they had to trade away Max Pacioretty because of it for hay pennies on the dollar. I made a video about it, which I'll leave a link to in the description. And now it's seeming like a better deal for the Golden Knights, given that Max Pacioretty tore his Achilles and will be out for the next 6 months. But at the time, that was a terrible deal, and I suspect some team will be able to get Alec Martinez extremely cheap as well. He's not even as good as Max Pacioretty, so it's not going to be quite as good of a deal, but it's still going to be a pretty good deal. I think the best team for Alec Martinez is the Winnipeg Jets. The Winnipeg Jets need some defensive help, and it would be nice to bring in a veteran to that room that's growing younger and younger. They have a couple other veterans, but why not bring another in, plus a quality defenseman, which they desperately need. I know. The Philadelphia Flyers traded for Ryan Ellis just over a year ago, last offseason, and yet he's already in trade rumors again. That's because Philadelphia was not the team most people expected them to be this past season. They sucked. And Ryan Ellis is an older player, so why not try and get him a Stanley Cup? But the team I kind of picked out for maybe not be the best for that. The Ottawa Senators. Now, hear me out. The Ottawa Senators signed Claude Giroux, who's a good veteran in that room. But you can't have too many veterans, as long as you have a supporting young cast as well. So I guess you can have too many veterans, which many teams experience. But, not my point. They could use a number 2 defenseman to line up next to Thomas Chabot, because Thomas Chabot is their only mediocre defenseman right now. And Ryan Ellis is a solid defenseman still. He has proven that he is still a capable defenseman in the NHL. So, I believe this would be a very good pairing. Although, there's a couple teams I named before, such as the Panthers or the Hurricanes, that if Ellis really wanted to win a Stanley Cup, those would be wiser teams for him to join. This time last year, Semyon Varlamov was a mediocre starting goalie. He was never great, but he wasn't bad. He's average. He's perfectly average. But then, Ilya Sorokin stepped in and played amazing. He was one of the best goalies in the league this past season. So there's no way he doesn't take the starting job from Varlamov, which he did. But Varlamov is still a capable starting goalie. Now, the Blue Jackets, on the other hand, have taken the weirdest approach to this offseason possible by looking like a rebuilding team, yet signing Johnny Gaudreau. So, they got a mediocre roster. Just below average, I'd say. They've got a couple fine players, but no one great. Now, Elvis Merklins is a capable goalie, but not an average goalie, not a good goalie. I never said Semyon Varlamov was good, but he's average, which is better than Elvis Merklins. So it would make sense for the New York Islanders to go on and ship out Varlamov, because they already have a starting goalie, they don't need 2. And on the other hand, the Blue Jackets could use an upgraded goalie, especially if they really want to contend for the playoffs. A couple of years ago, the Sharks acquired Erik Karlsson from the Ottawa Senators. At the time, the Sharks were a Stanley Cup contender. But now the Sharks are arguably the worst team in the league. So it doesn't make sense to hold on to older veterans like Karlsson. They already shipped out the older Brent Burns this offseason to the Carolina Hurricanes. So that shows their willingness to ship out some of their older veterans. And I think that includes Erik Karlsson. I think the best place for Erik Karlsson to land would be the Dallas Stars. They have 2 capable defensemen already, but losing Klingberg leaves a hole on the second line. And this would be the perfect situation for Karlsson because he doesn't need to step up and be the number 1 defenseman on a team. He can sit back in the role of a number 3 defenseman instead of a number 1 defenseman. So he can still play as a quality player, but the whole team isn't relying on him to perform. The next 3 out of 4 players are all Chicago Blackhawks, starting with who I believe is the worst of the 3 best current Chicago Blackhawks players, Jonathan Taves. I don't need to explain this to you. I've already made multiple videos about it, which I'll leave links to in the description. Alex DeBrincat and Kirby Dach were both traded away this offseason, which leaves the Blackhawks in a weird stage, because they held on to all of their older veterans. Jonathan Taves, Patrick Kane, and Seth Jones. The other two are coming up, don't worry. But, for some reason, they shipped out the young guys. I mean, who does that? Why would you do that? If you're a rebuilding team, keep the young guys. I get DeBrincat a bit. He's a bit older. But Kirby Dach was just coming out of the minors. I mean, this makes no sense to me. He's supposed to be a superstar. He's barely played the NHL, but has tons of potential. Why would they trade him away? It makes no sense to me, as I've said many times before. But the Blackhawks still have 3 of their older capable players. But I believe if they're trying to go all in and tank for the number 1 overall pick, likely Connor Bedard, then they've got to trade away everyone. And that includes Jonathan Taves. Jonathan Taves is a solid player, but he's not as good as he used to be. I think the best destination for him would be the Colorado Avalanche, because they don't need a superstar. They just need a veteran. They need someone who can still perform, especially after losing Andrei Burakovsky and Nazem Kadri this offseason. Well, Nazem Kadri is still a free agent. He could resign, but assuming he doesn't, Taves would be a perfect replacement. He's still a solid player, but they don't need an amazing player. They've got Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar. So he would likely lead the team, along with Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar, Gabriel Landeskog, and everyone else on that team. They would likely win the Stanley Cup again with the addition of Jonathan Taves. Might be a couple teams in their way, but they will be amazing for a second year in a row with Jonathan Taves. I already explained this. Blackhawks shipped out their younger players, makes no sense to me, but they still have their older players, but they should ship them out because they want the number 1 overall pick. That includes Seth Jones, who was acquired last offseason, but, like I said, you gotta get rid of everybody. And Seth Jones did not perform up to expectations. He was traded for quite a bit, but he hasn't performed as well as the Blackhawks would have hoped. None of the Blackhawks team did. Fleury had to be traded mid-season because of it. So now I believe Seth Jones' tenure in Chicago will already be to an end. I think the best destination for Seth Jones would be the Los Angeles Kings. They've already proven this offseason that they will strike big on trades with Kevin Fiala. So why not add another player? They've got Drew Doughty, but after that, they don't have any amazing defensemen. So it would be a great addition and a welcome addition with Seth Jones on that roster. They would easily rocket into the playoffs as well with the addition of Seth Jones. Finally, someone who is not a Chicago Blackhawks player. The goalie market has really dried up after the fact that Jack Campbell and Darcy Kemper found new teams, but the Maple Leafs and Avalanche both got replacements. There isn't really any teams that need a goalie. Jack Campbell, though, has requested a trade, from what I know. He hasn't publicly, but it's likely that he's asked the Ducks for a trade. But then, he went and vetoed a trade to Toronto, which would have been perfect for him, because that was before Toronto acquired Matt Murray by trade and Ilya Samsonov in free agency. But Jack Campbell was likely to leave in free agency, which he did. The Maple Leafs could have gotten a perfect replacement in John Gibson. But instead, he completely vetoed the trade. He has a no-trade clause and said he doesn't want to play for Toronto. It's stupid because he says he wants a better defense and he says he wants to win a Stanley Cup. And yet, he denied the team that has a good defense and that could be in contention for a Stanley Cup. There are no teams left that could trade for Gibson that are full-on contenders. But I think the trade that I've mocked up here would be very interesting. Get this. John Gibson to the New Jersey Devils in exchange for Mackenzie Blackwood and a pick. You gotta admit, that would be amazing. Mackenzie Blackwood and the Devils seem to have parted ways. Mackenzie Blackwood's younger than John Gibson, but also injury prone. So it makes sense for the Devils to look for an upgrade at goalie. Mackenzie Blackwood's good, and he's young. He has plenty of potential. If he gets over these injuries, he could be great. But it seems like his time in New Jersey's done. The Ducks, on the other hand, could use a young goalie that could be great. So this would be perfect for the Ducks, get a younger goalie who's still very good. On the other hand, the Devils, who are about in the same position as the Ducks, maybe a bit closer to the playoffs, could use a better goalie. Plus, like I said, they seem to have drifted away from Mackenzie Blackwood, so why not bring in another good goalie, an even better goalie? But the catch to that is that the only thing that would justify bringing in John Gibson is if they're looking to make the playoffs in the next couple of years. I thought they were, but then they didn't really do anything this offseason. Their only major addition was Ondrej Palat. They didn't get Johnny Gaudreau, they didn't get anyone else. They only got Ondrej Palat. But if they were to bring in Nazem Kadri, then yeah, they'd totally be a playoff contender, no question. I've explained this, but in case you've forgotten in the 2 minutes that I was talking about John Gibson, the Blackhawks trade away their youngest players this offseason, and now are stuck with their 3 older players who are still valuable, but aren't so good anymore. If they truly want to contend for the number 1 overall pick, then they've got to get rid of everybody, and I've said that too many times already. So that includes Patrick Kane. You know, all good things must come to an end, and that includes Patrick Kane's tenure in Chicago. I think the best destination by far for Patrick Kane would be the New York Rangers. Seeing him reunite with Artemi Panarin would be amazing. Plus, the New York Rangers are a Stanley Cup contender. This would be a lot like the Jonathan Taves edition, but the difference is they're looking for Patrick Kane to perform with Artemi Panarin again. They made it to the semifinals, so they are the real deal. Adding Patrick Kane to this roster would easily bring them to the Stanley Cup. And probably they'd play the Avalanche, if not the Oilers. The Oilers, interestingly enough, are another team that's been rumored for Patrick Kane. But I don't think that'd be a great idea. They've got a really good offense. They brought back Evander Kane. They don't need another Kane on that roster. What they need is a solid third-line defenseman who's younger and cheaper than Tyson Barrie. That's what they truly need. They don't need anyone on offense. Now, for all of Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane, both times the Blackhawks would have to retain some salary because their contracts are massive. But I don't think they'd mind. They'd get more in return if they retained some of the salary. So it would make perfect sense for all of the teams involved. And I'm looking forward, if these trades happen, to a Colorado Avalanche versus New York Rangers Stanley Cup. But for now, we'll have to see. Some of these players might not get traded. Some might go to completely different teams. We'll have to see. But thank you so much for watching.